What is the Nordic model? This is our belief that we believe in a strong and influential private sector, and we also believe in a state which limits its industrial policies to what is necessary. And as you see, I mentioned tripartism, the cooperation between the state and the social partners, the trade unions and the employers' organization. That is not always, that is not obvious to all that we should believe in tripartism. There are some in international meetings where we meet foreign employers' organizations, and they say that they don't believe in tripartism. They said we should not interfere too much with the state, and we should not interfere too much with the trade unions. And at least you shouldn't let the trade unions and the employees decide so much. But we think that is a good thing to do, to have a system where tripartism is very important. And also bipartism, that we have a cooperation between the trade unions and the employers' organizations. I'll come back to that later because that is the most central part here. But what is important to stress is that LO, which is the main trade union, LO was established back in 1899. And NHO, we were established in 1900, 1 year later. So this means that it's a very, very long tradition, and the development has been very slowly, step by step, over the last 113, 14 years. You could not establish a new system overnight. It has to be done gradually. So this is a very strong point seen from our point of view. And we have strong organizations. I think about 55% of all employees in Norway are unionized. They are a member of a trade union, between 50 and 55%. And together with the other Scandinavian countries, that's the highest percentage in Europe. The way we cooperate, that is defined by ourselves, not by the government or the parliament or the politicians. And we have a well-established cooperation. So these are characteristics of the Norwegian model when it comes to industrial relations. A few other points to be mentioned, which is at least seen from a European perspective is quite interesting, is that we do not have a minimum wage. There is, in most European countries, there is a minimum wage set by the government, set by the parliament, and no one can go below that floor. That is not the case in Norway, which means that the minimum wage can vary according to which sector you are in, because the minimum wage is quite common to have in the collective agreements. So the minimum wage will be different for a journalist than for instance, a carpenter. So there is no national minimum wage fixed by the government. So that is the case in Norway. From our side, from NHO side, we have asked the government at least that they should consider and see or assess what will be the best thing, because now we have very many cases where we are accused of having social dumping, that we have too low wages for the employees. And especially now in the last 10 years, many people coming from Eastern Europe, and they are willing to work for much less than the Norwegians do. What should we have then? And then we have a quite complicated system to avoid that. But if you had a minimum wage, you could say, this is what you have to pay, take it or leave it. But now we have very many obstacles and quite a complicated system.
So the sector-specific minimum wage is not determined by the state, it is determined by the industry?
Exactly, it's determined by the social partners, the trade unions and the trade unions and the employers' organization. When they make a collective agreement, it's said that in this all employees covered by this agreement should have a minimum wage of this and this. And that is not the same in all branches, in all sectors. So it's not decided, it's not determined by the government, but by the social partners. All have to pay the minimum wage, but you can pay as much as you want above this minimum. But we have some areas regulated by legislation, which means that it's applies to everyone, not only to the members of the union. And that goes, for instance, to holiday entitlements, minimum patient sick leave and maternity leave and so on. And the role of the trade unions, that is, of course, that is obvious, that it's freedom for all to unionize or to stay outside. You are not forced to become a member of a union. They are free and independent. As I said, very, very strong link between the Social Democratic Party and the main trade union, LO, but it's not the same body, and they are free and independent. As I said here, it's a clearly political preference. LO, they prefer absolutely the Social Democratic Party. The problem for them is that, the problem for LO is that you have polls which shows that I think it's about 50% of the members, they support other political parties than the Social Democratic parties. They got lots of members not supporting their official policy, LO's official policy, which is to back and support the Social Democratic parties. So we have collective agreements, but in addition to that, when it comes to industrial relations, we have what is called here as a workplace democracy, is that you have this body within the companies dealing with issues of importance for the employees. So it is the management is obliged to consult the employees' representatives before they take any decisions of importance for the employees. This is sometimes quite time-consuming, and it's not always the case that it is of very good value for the management. But I think seen overall on a general perspective, is it better for the management to try to involve the workforce before a decision is taken than having a very hard and tough confrontation after it has been decided, and then it's been decided without any involvement of the workers. So these works councils, they are quite important. And but it's varies quite a lot from company to company how efficient they are. In some places they are very good, and they have good cooperation. And sometimes it's a very sleeping body, a sleeping council which does not meet very often. And in some companies they are very confrontational, where you don't have a good cooperation at all. It's very hard battles all the time, and it can be very counterproductive because it helps to make the conflict bigger than smaller. But altogether, I think, as I said, this is a good way of dealing with it. All companies have a board of directors, and according to Norwegian legislation, the employees are entitled to have 1/3 of the members of the board. They are elected by the employees, among the employees. And that has been the case. This was introduced in Norway in the 1960s, 1970s, what was called industrial democracy. So, but it has to be said that some places it's said that it's the members elected among the employees they are regarded as a sort of, well, to put it brutal, second class compared to the others one. But they are entitled to have 1/3 of the members.
1/3 of the board members are those employees.
Yes, right.
And did you have any bad experience with this kind of composition?
We have some bad experience in the sense that they only think of the workers' interest, not of the, because there are some areas, for instance, it's the level of cost in Norway is very high. So it's very common now that you take the manufacturing part is often moved from Norway to, for instance, eastern part of Europe, because it's much cheaper. And that decision has to be taken by the board. And in all cases, the employee representatives say no, because that means that some of their colleagues will be made redundant and will be sacked from the company. And the other board members, they think that they should think of the interest of the whole company, not only on the workers, the employees' interest. Because many companies think that if you don't move anything abroad, if you don't let everything stay in Norway, the company will go bankrupt in 10 years' time because you can't afford to be in Norway with the entire staff. And that is not the case for the members of the board elected by the employees, because they only think of the workers.
The 1/3 of the employee board of members, is this the mandatory by the law?
Yeah.
This is applied to all the business organizations, regardless of the size of the...
If you have more than 50 employees. 50, 50, yeah. That is the, I think that I'm 95% sure that the limit is 50, but it's not for everyone, every company is. I'll come to the collective agreements, because then you have at both levels actually. And then I'll say a few words about what we call the basic agreement, which is often referred to as the constitutional work life in Norway. Between the wars, between the First and Second World War, we had a very, very turbulent time in Norway. And at that time, Norway was a very poor country, and it was a class struggle, and the communism and the socialist ideas, they were very strong in Europe, which meant that we had a number of wild strikes and got a lot of social problems. And the fight between NHO and LO, that was very hard and very bitter. But really, after a long process, but which took place mostly behind the scenes, that just a few people were informed, they agreed in 1935 to enter into this basic agreement. And that is referred to as the constitutional work life in Norway. And the main thing about this basic agreement is that it's meant to have a sort of, to represent a sort of foundation for how the cooperation should be between the management and the workers. The most important things, that is about the information and consultation process between the management and the workers.
What's the next step on the evaluation?
They can be taken to, that is the last part of what they're talking about, but that it can be taken before the court. But the court can say you have to a company that you have violated the collective agreement, you have violated the basic agreement, but they are not entitled to give any sort of fines and not send anyone to jail or something. But it is you have to, at least almost all employers in Norway try to stick to the obligations they have according to the basic agreement. They won't like it at all if they have a court ruling saying that you have violated the basic agreement. So what we do is that we have negotiations between at the company level and then at NHO and LO. LO is the main trade union, as I said. And we try to solve the questions, and if we don't succeed, if we don't reach an agreement, okay, then the case is taken to court.
I'd like to ask you the question about the role of government in the serious company.
In this respect, no, they have no role at all.
So government doesn't interfere anything about.
When it comes to basic agreement, no, not at all. So this is completely left to the social partners. Only the trade unions and the employers' organizations are. And this basic agreement, this is between NHO and LO, but NHO, we are not the only employers' organization, and LO is not the only the trade union, but we are the biggest on each side, so all the other basic agreements are very similar to the one we make. So we are its advantages and disadvantages being the largest one and the most influential one, but we make the first one and then the others copy it more or less 100% afterwards. But for the government, no role. Now I come to the terms and conditions, and that is the normal collective agreements. And then we have, as I said, NHO, we are an umbrella association, and we got 20 branch sector organizations underneath this umbrella, and the same goes for LO. They have their own unions inside the LO family, dealing with, for instance, agriculture, graphical sector, and so on. And it's more or less up to LO to decide if we want negotiations on the NHO-LO level, or if they would have it at sectoral level. The most common one is to have it on sectoral level, which means that you have negotiations on sector level all the time. And there you have decide salary increases and payments and framework for local agreements and so on. The point is that this is regarded as the most important agreements for the trade union, because here it's decided how much the salary increase will be. So, and then you have local level, and this is what we talked about previously. You have, for instance, at the central level, you have an increase of, say, 3%, so which means that all companies will have a pay increase of 3%. And then there is a company which is very profitable, and a large company, they will say, okay, we have the economic muscle to give 5% this year, and they can do so. So you have a local negotiations after the central one has been finalized. And the point is that on this sectoral or central level, then you can have strikes. So there we have had plenty of strikes, but when it comes to the local level, at company level, then it's not possible to have strikes. Then it's always, you have to negotiate, and they say that according to the central level, all of you will have 5 kroner per hour, but in addition from us, you will have 1 krona. And then the employee said, no, we will have 3. And then you could discuss, and if they don't reach an agreement, the employer decides. And then it's not possible to go on strike. That is only on this central and or sectoral level. If that's failed, then you can go on strike.
During the strike period, they pay money, they pay wage?
No, the company does not pay wage, but the employees receive a sort of the income from the trade union. And that is, it depends, that's up to the trade union how much that is, but approximately half pay or something. And they built up over the last years quite considerable funds, both at the employer side or at the trade union side. So we pay our companies who are on strike, they receive money from NHO.
And during the strike period, they occupy the factory and office and don't permit anybody to go in.
They cannot go in, but they are entitled to stay outside and distribute the flyers. And we are on
they strike outside of the factory. And
outside
office.
of, they are not
And
entitled.
those employers and other people can enter. the
Absolutely.
office.
And it's quite common that, as I said, I used to work for the media business, and we had strike among the journalists in 2002 and 2004. And then they had people who are not members of the union, they are not on strike, so they had a very few people writing and making the newspaper. And you had all the other employees, people selling advertisement, and people.
But if labor occupy their factory and office and does not permit anybody to enter the factory or office, is that by law is unlawful?
Yeah, that's unlawful. Absolutely.
And then the police might intervene the situation.
Yeah, we try as long as we can to keep the police out, but if that and it's many years since we had, in the 70s we had some tough period, and then the police had to interfere sometimes, but normally they do not come. We haven't. What will happen normally then is that the company contacts NHO, and we in NHO we contact the trade union, and then we have a meeting, and then the trade union, the central LO, will contact their local shop steward and say you should stop that, because if you keep on doing that, you will be taken to court and you will have to pay damages to the company, because the company has to shut down, or they will at least have their profit reduced because they can't operate as they should. They can stop the members of the union on strike, they should not work. But the others can work, and they are not entitled to occupy or to block the company in any ways.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.